Okay, I think we're going to get started. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. My name's Dave Roberts. I'm the Capital Projects Manager here at Woodland Pond. This meeting will be recorded and it'll be available on the Woodland Pond YouTube site tomorrow for you to review in your own time. I think the goal for tonight's meeting is to present our environmental findings for the site adjacent to Woodland Pond's existing site. That site will be the site of future application for development that will go in front of the Newpolts Village Planning Board probably sometime in the next year. Firstly, we'll hear briefly from Ken Casamento from LRC Group, our civil engineers. He has coordinated with all the consultants and been the centre point for his team, coordinating with the consultants doing the environmental assessment. Then we'll hand over to Mike Fishman. He's a wildlife biologist, wetland scientist and regulatory specialist. He's the main event tonight. He's going to walk us through all his findings, and then at the end of the evening, we'll take questions for, if anyone has any. I encourage you at the end of the night, you'll see my email will go up. I have business cards. I encourage any of you, if you have questions, to reach out to me. And if I can't answer the question, I'll certainly find out the information for you and get back to you. This is really important to us for the community to have an understanding about, what the site presents to us and the challenges maybe that we have in addressing the site. But it's an opportunity for us to listen to any concerns that the community might have about, what's on the site and to comment accordingly. So I'll hand it over to Ken, and I thank you for your time.
See if I can make it move. So my name's Ken Casamento from LRC. We're the design engineers and surveyors for the property. We were brought on from Woodland Pond to work with the existing property as well as the future property, which you'll see here in yellow, but we'll bring it up on screen in a minute, to really go through and look at what are our constraints on the property and what are the things that we want to be cognizant of as we look forward to a future. So as part of our initial due diligence, we've done a bunch of studies on the property. We went out and did an original phase 1 study on the property. We've done a subsequent phase 2 study as there was a historic apple orchard on the property. So we did some further studies on the ground and the soils around that. We did boundary and topo on that, as well as getting into the wetland delineation and habitat assessment. The main parcel is about 86 acres. Currently, there's about 56 acres of that in conservation easement. Woodland's been dedicated to protecting as much as they can. The new parcel is about 17.5 acres, give or take, and the intent is to work with putting as much as we can into further conservation easements on that property as well to further protect the lands as we go forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Ken. Okay. So we're going to try not to disorient you here tonight because the first map you're looking at here is oriented one way and the rest of the maps are oriented a little bit differently, but I'll walk you through that. So as part of the environmental due diligence, we looked at wetlands. We did a formal wetland delineation on the site. We also did a biodiversity survey on the site, identified rare, threatened, and endangered species habitats. We did not find any rare, threatened, or endangered species on the site, but there's potential habitat for some. And so we started. Oh, wait a minute. Let's see. Where's the laser pointer? Is that it? There we go. Okay, so this is the existing campus here. This is North Putt Corners Road. And the parcel that we're talking about is this area here. And these light gray areas depicted here are wetlands that were identified on the site. This way is north. So that's the main campus. That's the new parcel. Still same orientation. We've zoomed in a little bit. And again, these light gray areas are wetlands that we delineated and identified on the site. And again, still oriented north. George Danskin Way is here. Ermine Lane is here. North Putt Corners Road is here. So now I'm going to turn the map 90 degrees. North is now at the top of the map. This is I-87. This is North Putt Corners Road. Here's the main campus, and this is the parcel. Okay. From here on out, we're going to look at it like this. So hopefully that didn't confuse anybody. So we started out by doing what we call an online data review. We go online, we look at government records, various databases, things like that, to identify what the environmental sensitivities might be on the site. Start with looking at things like critical environmental areas. Are there any designated critical environmental areas on or even near the site? And the reason this map is on such a small scale, you can see this new site is right here. It's on such a small scale because the nearest critical environmental area is very far away. So there's no critical environmental areas located on or near the site. We looked at soils. Soils are very important. They determine where wetlands are located. So it's one of the first things we look at, trying to determine where we're going to find wetlands. Also determine what kinds of things may grow, also what kinds of things can get into the soils. So on this site, we did find what are called hydric soils. Soils that are prone to forming wetlands are located here, here, and over here. And interestingly enough, that's exactly where we found the wetlands on the site. This is a national hydrography database map, in case any of you want to go look these up. This is a map that basically shows you where water exists, is known to exist at the surface, and what direction it flows in. Okay, so on this map, if you can see these light blue lines with little arrows on them, that tells you that there's little streams that flow through here. These are unnamed tributaries to the Mill Creek area. Mill Creek then flows down into the Wallkill River. Again, this is the site. These pink lines are actually drawn in by me to indicate where the site drains to. So we have wetlands that are on this side of George Danskin Way that drain down here into Mill Creek. This wetland north of Ermine Lane drains actually underneath the entrance road to the Woodland Pond facility, existing facility, drains up here around and down to Mill Creek. And this wetland that's south of Ermine Lane rather, flows to the south and joins this unnamed tributary that flows down into Mill Creek. So there is surface hydrology that connects all of those wetlands to surface waters. That's important because a wetland, in order to be regulated by the federal government under the EPA and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, has to be connected directly to surface waters. Oh, actually, let me go back here. There is one wetland on the site. We're going to discuss this one in a little more detail. This little horseshoe-shaped pond here. Not sure you can see that, but we'll get a close-up of it, I think, further in. That's a little woodland pond, and there are a number of ponds like that in the area. And that particular pond was noted in a study done by Hudsonia back in 2006 as being a significant pond. For its breeding qualities for amphibians, things like that. So that does occur on the property, and I'll discuss that a little bit further. That pond does not have an outlet, however, so it's not connected to any other navigable surface waters. It's not a federally regulated wetland. As a result, it's an isolated wetland. It is a state-regulated wetland. So this is a federal wetland map. Federal wetland maps indicate where there may be wetlands. The actual regulated wetlands must be delineated in the field. So if a wetland is not on this map, it doesn't mean it's not regulated. It just means the federal, the folks who made the maps for the National Wildlife Service couldn't see the wetland on an aerial photograph. That's how they interpreted these. That's how they created them. So just because it's not on this map doesn't mean it's not regulated. This just gives you an idea of where you should be looking for wetlands, federal wetlands. These are the new state wetland maps. State wetland maps now include what used to be mapped wetlands, but DEC doesn't have mapped wetlands anymore. And that sounds weird because we're looking at a state wetland map. But these purple areas are what are called informational freshwater wetlands. They're where the DEC thinks there might be wetlands based on review of a number of different types of data, soils data, hydrology data, aerial photographs, things like that. Okay, and again, gives us a guide as to where we should be looking for wetlands on the landscape. So you'll notice that there's a wetland coming in from the north side of Ermine Lane, which is right here. That's where that little horseshoe-shaped pond is. Then there's this little wetland here that drains down towards Mill Creek. Okay, or Mill Brook, rather. Okay, then we also did look at the town and village of New Paltz natural resource inventory just to see what resources were identified there. It's a very small scale map. We did the best we could. The town, of course, has their own wetland maps, but the town wetland maps don't apply in the village. They're exclusive of the village. But there were, in this little box here, there were still some wetlands indicated. So we knew, again, that was somewhere we needed to be looking for wetlands when we got to the site. All of this information that I've been showing you, this is all desktop work before we ever leave the office, just so that we're planning for our field work and knowing what we should be looking for when we get here. We also check floodplain maps to determine whether the site may fall into a 100-year floodplain. That is a regulation under the FEMA. If you fill in a 100-year floodplain, you can actually nullify federal protection against floods for the entire town. So we're very careful about checking for that. The good news is nothing on this site falls within any 100-year floodplain of any stream. So it's completely outside of a 100-year floodplain. So we went out, we delineated wetlands on the site. This was a sketch map of what we found, not the actual survey. The survey I think we'll show you further on that has a more accurate boundary. But these were just kind of rough polygons that we sketched in based on our mapping from what we could determine in the field. The actual placement of the flags was surveyed by a licensed surveyor and plotted on a survey. But what we found was a fairly large area of wetland up here, which is wetland B. This is actually off the parcel. But it's important that we identify it because it falls within 100 feet of the parcel. And therefore, if it's a state regulated wetland, part of the regulated adjacent area to that wetland falls onto this property. So we need to account for that. Wetland A down here is on the parcel. This drains to the south, this drains to the north. This is that little horseshoe-shaped pond and an adjacent wooded wetland that goes up and off site here. And then this little wetland here drains again down to Millbrook. Okay, and those are the areas involved. This is about 0.6 of an acre. That's about 0.9 of an acre. That's about 2.8 acres just in the area that was delineated. It's a much larger wetland off site. And that's about 7 acres or so, but again, that goes off site. Okay. We also went out and identified all of the ecological communities on the site. Ecological communities is another fancy name for habitats. We call them ecological communities. They are classified in New York State under a document called Ecological Communities of New York State, logically enough. But it's a way of standardizing how you describe all of the various habitats. And a lot of these sort of blend and meld together a little bit, so there aren't hard boundaries between them. Some of the boundaries you can put are between wetlands and uplands, but there's about 9 different habitat types on the site. They include Appalachian oak hickory forest, which is this hilltop here. There's a small landfill junkyard area there's a concrete slab on the property where there's been waste material and soil material dumped and deposited, and that is actually a community, believe it or not. There's a northern white cedar swamp in this little wetland over here, also a shrub swamp. Paved roads and unpaved roads throughout the site. Paved road being George Danskin Way. There's an unpaved road that crosses the site. It's actually an extension of Ermine Lane, which is here. Red maple hardwood swamps are these wetlands here, and the extension of this wetland up into here. There's a woodland pond, of course, and that's that little horseshoe-shaped pond. There's successional northern hardwood forest, a bit of scrub shrub swamp right in the middle of this northern white cedar swamp, and that pretty much covers it. So there's a lot of different communities. Why do we identify communities? Because communities determine what kind of wildlife and plants we're going to find on the site. So again, they help to, each step of the way here, we're informing the next stage of survey so that we can identify what is there and what should be there. We did assessments for rare, threatened, and endangered species. And there's 3 different species or groups of species that are potential to the site because they occur in the area. One is listed or endangered bat species, Indiana bat, northern long-eared bat, and tricolored bat. The first 2 species are already listed as endangered. The third one is proposed to be listed as endangered. The monarch butterfly, which is proposed to be listed as a threatened species, and bog turtle, which is a threatened species. So we did an investigation on the site, first for bats, which is my specialty. And we did find that there is bat habitat on the site. Most of the forested area on the site is appropriate for bats. The areas that are shaded in red here are not. That's the concrete pad. Bats don't tend to spend a lot of time around open concrete pads. And this is the paved road, George Danskin Way. And this area here is that cedar swamp. And cedar swamp is so thick and so dense that bats can't fly through it. So it's not really considered potential habitat for them. But the rest of the site is. I don't have maps for the other 2 species, mostly because for monarch butterflies, there is no appropriate habitat for them on this site, other than what we call pass-through habitat. They will fly through the woods. They will fly through open areas. But what we did not find here was their host plant that they need for development, and that is common milkweed. And they're not restricted to common milkweed. They use common milkweed most often in this area. They use other milkweeds as well, but they rely specifically on milkweeds because the sap from milkweeds helps to make them toxic, which is a protection against predators. So they need that plant. We did not find that plant on the site, so we can't say that there's appropriate breeding habitat for them here. We know that they pass through the site probably because they pass through anywhere they want to fly, but that's not considered dependent habitat. For bog turtles, there are wooded wetlands on the site. Bog turtles are known to move through wooded wetlands between their breeding grounds. So there could potentially be turtles that move through the site if there was a known breeding ground nearby, but there isn't. There aren't any ones very close by. However, that's not to say that could there be bog turtles supported somewhere nearby? Yes, that's a potential. So we want to identify that the wetland habitats here, bog turtles could use. Okay. So what were our findings? We did find federal and state regulated wetlands. Okay, the only non-federal regulated wetland was the Horseshoe Pond because it's an isolated wetland, but it is state regulated. All of the wetlands on the site are state regulated because they fall within the urban area of the village of New Paltz. That's a new state regulation. And so they are all designated as class 2 wetlands because for the same reason, they fall within an urban area. Okay, urban area doesn't mean you suddenly live in a city. Urban area has to do with a density of population. So we have the wetlands on the site that we showed you. The Woodland Pond wetland, Wetland C, is of potential significance. And it was identified by Gretchen Stevens of Hudsonia back in 2006 of being significant. We did see wood frog eggs and tadpoles in there in the spring. So it is a breeding pond. It is not classified as formally as a vernal pool by DEC. Okay, DEC has to have data from that pond. It has to be on a list of vernal pools recognized by the state to be considered a vernal pool by the state. And it's not on that list because the only pools on that list are on state land. And this is private land. DEC hasn't yet sorted out how they want people surveying these pools because the species that you're required to survey for are actually protected and regulated species, and you have to have a permit to survey for them. And so I can visually identify them, but I can't touch them. I can't disturb them without having a special handling permit for them. And so DEC is still juggling with how to actually document these. That being said, we recognize it's an important pond. And so in looking at planning for the site, and trying to come up with a site plan, we want to make sure that pond is left alone. It does have a 100-foot regulated adjacent area by the DEC. However, there are guidelines for amphibian breeding pools that were developed back in the early 2000s that say you really don't want to disturb more than about 25% of the area within 750 feet of a known breeding pool, because you want to allow for amphibians to be able to move between wetlands in undisturbed uplands. And so that's part of the goal when we develop the site or the site adjacent to it. We want to make sure we're not disturbing more than 25%. We want to keep that adjacent area intact because we know it's important. So that area surrounding that pond is going to probably become part of the conservation easement, okay, to protect that. As I noted, there is potential listed bat habitat on site, but if trees are cleared in that habitat in the wintertime, the bats are not harmed. Okay, it is a decrease in habitat, yes, that's true, but there's no direct take of bats if you clear trees in the wintertime because bats are hibernating underground at that time of year. Okay. There's no bog turtle nesting habitat. There is transient habitat, but we're not going into the wetlands. We're leaving the wetlands alone. And we want to maintain connectivity among the wetlands so that anything that relies on the wetlands can move between them. Okay. And as I said, there's no monarch butterfly breeding habitat, so we don't necessarily have to worry about that. And we're not going to be creating big open habitats that would favor them. So our goal, these are the actual delineated wetlands here. So you can see the edge. Here's the horseshoe-shaped pond. And that's wetland A, B, C, and D. We're back to that same orientation we started with. Is anybody dizzy yet? Okay. And this is Ermine Lane. So the red lines show the regulated area. Okay, that's the regulated adjacent area. There should probably be another red line here showing the off-site regulated area, but there is a dashed line there. So our goal in developing a site plan for this is we have to go through the sequencing process that we have to go through on every design project. And that is, first, you try to avoid impacting regulated areas. You avoid wetlands, you avoid the adjacent area if you can. Sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes you have to go through an adjacent area to do some work or get access to a piece of property or something like that. Sometimes it's necessary. We try to minimize that as much as we possibly can and to the practical degree that we can. However, sometimes you have to work in an adjacent area. We are committed to avoiding the wetlands. We will not go into wetlands. But sometimes you have to go into the edge of an adjacent area. It can't be avoided. If that happens, we will be getting the appropriate permits from DEC. We'll have to go through the regulatory process with DEC in order to get that approved. Okay. And as we said, we're also committing the non-mandated additional protection. This is not a regulation. It's a recommendation made by a book that was written back in 2001 by Michael Clemens, who's a well-renowned herpetologist. And their recommendation was no more than 25% disturbance within 750 feet of breeding pools. And we are going to accomplish that. Okay. And as I said, we minimize whatever we can't avoid has to be permitted by DEC. It has to go through their review. They have to approve it before we can do it. Okay. I'm not saying they have to approve it, but we can't do it unless they do approve it. Okay. So it goes through a fairly intensive review at their end. So our next steps, we're working on developing a site plan, working with the upland areas that exist. Let me just back up here. So we're looking at these areas here and this area here, which are basically the two biggest pockets of upland on the site, buildable upland. Okay, non-regulated area. That's where we'd like to focus what we're doing. Believe me, nobody wants to go through the DEC permitting process if they don't absolutely have to. Okay. However, we have to maintain some connectivity among these pieces. And so that may require at some point coming through here and having to connect, and those regulated adjacent areas from those two wetlands connect. But there's an existing dirt road there. And so we're hoping for that connection to make use of an existing dirt road. Okay, it's already there. And we're not looking to create a highway. We're not even looking for a road for vehicles, big cars and trucks. But there may need to be a path of some kind going through there. If we're working within the adjacent area, we will have to submit, as I said, permit applications to DEC and go through that review. We also need to get appropriate permits from the Village of New Paltz, from both planning and zoning. And we hope to be getting into that in early 2026. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I guess we can take them now, or yeah.
So part of our DEC permit that we are going to go in, which Mike pointed out, is that concrete slab that sits here. There's a portion of it that is in the buffer. And as part of our permit, we're going in no matter what, because we want to remove that. And we want to restore that back to natural habitat instead of having it as a concrete slab right adjacent to that area, knowing what Mike said about the woodland pond that's right there.
Point out on the map where our existing property lines are vis-a-vis the other wetlands to the north. And
let me go back to the bigger map. That might be easier. So on this map here, this is the wetlands that Mike was talking about in here. This here extends up here. Mike came back and mapped this end because it was critical to the future on the new property. These were mapped as part of the original development. This wetland on the what would be the west side or bottom of page, this one extends down into this area here. The stipple, which you see on here, this is the conservation area, these areas here. So as you can see, this whole area is all under conservation easement and protection. The intent with what we're looking at is to hopefully redo that conservation easement, and we've been in discussion with the current conservation holder to add continuity to the wetlands to head to the south and also east and west here as well.
I can take questions. You do have to do them on this mic though, because that way it goes onto the YouTube feed properly. So I'll pass the mic around.
Yeah. I think my first question is for Mike. So you spoke a lot about the drainage down into the various tributaries. So with the removal, a lot of trees, that's a natural filtration. And I know being an orchard, there's all sorts of things that comes along with that. Is there concern with that some of that leftover arsenic or whatever was used for the orchards would then drain down? Is that for you? Sorry, Ken.
No worries at all.
Would that then drain down because the trees, the roots, et cetera, are now gone to filter that out?
So as part of, like we said, we did a phase 1 and a phase 2.
Mm-hmm.
We did identify some of the arsenic in the upper soil levels and different levels. As part of our plan, we're going to mitigate all that. So all of that soil will be taken, placed, re-established, and put in a place where it does not impact any of the stormwater. So we don't have erosion, because those materials are typically fixed to the soils. They don't, unlike petroleum or something like that, where it goes into the water, they stay in the soils. They would move in loose soils, like you said, but we're going to protect that, move it all.
Do you know how deep down or how much topsoil and put down? Or
they range where they are from 4 inches to 3 feet, depending on places. So we have a planned map of where it all is. We're going to go in as part of the design when we get into the redevelopment, know where we go. We're not going to go pull it out of areas that are naturally habitat that we're not touching. So areas that if there is impacted area that is in a buffer or is in an adjacent area, we're not going to go in the adjacent area because we're not touching it. We're going to leave it as it is today. Any areas that we would be impacting, we'll move, relocate, bury, and put it in an area where it's safe and does not impact anything for the future, just like it is today.
And this is a process that we had to follow for the original construction as well. because that lead and arsenic is all through that entire corridor. And we have obviously a significant amount of wetlands on the existing property as well, so. And DEC has to oversee that, right?
There is a remedial plan that we'll have to submit for them, so they're aware of it as well.
Thank you for all your work. I'm confused because you said you might have to go into an adjacent area and you just said you weren't going to. So
We are definitely for the concrete slab
yeah,
that's here to remove it.
yeah.
As Mike pointed out, Ermin Lane that connects through here now as a dirt road, compacted gravel road, we're likely going to want to reuse that connection so that there is a connection here to here, not necessarily for a road, but for pedestrian access, for maybe a cart path or something like that, which would require us to go in. We're still in the concept full development phase, so we don't have a final design, but we know when we were talking about it, Mike's thought process was this here, that we're definitely, that we might go in for, but this area here, we're definitely going in for the concrete slab because we want to restore that area.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that is in the adjacent area too. It's not in wetland, what we're talking about, not touching the wetlands at all.
Who else? I'm coming to the front.
Sorry, Mike, didn't mean to stand forward.
Hi, thank you. I got here late. I don't know if I missed a little more information about where the proposed development is. It's east and west of the farthest most wetland?
So Mike pointed out, we don't have a full plan yet. We have concepts. We're working through that. Idea being we'll get there into the early part of January. But the areas that we've identified as suitable for development are up in here, and then in this area in here, that are outside of any of the adjacent areas in that.
This might be for Dave or maybe I'm wondering why the parcel goes west of Danskin when it's a small parcel and there's wetlands there and you're not planning to build there. Why is the parcel going west of Danskin?
So the parcel lines are the parcel lines as the properties are today. So we're not changing anything with parcel lines. In here, there is a smaller parcel as the property in yellow is made up of two existing parcels. We're showing it as one because we're consolidating it into one parcel. These lines are where they are. George Danson currently had an easement through the yellow parcel for Woodland Pond proper.
Thank you.
So just a little bit more to that. It's our intention, as I think several people said, to put all of the non-buildable land into the conservation easement, which it currently is not in a conservation easement, which theoretically means it could be developed in some way. But our intention is fully to put whatever we acquire that is not buildable or developable into that conservation easement perpetually. For those that don't know me, I'm Michelle Grimoli. I'm the CEO. Currently that's held by the Wallkill Valley Land Trust. They're the land trustee. And just in terms of how that gets adjudicated, they do at a minimum an annual site visit to make sure they walk all of the conservation easement land with our conservation easement document in hand to make sure that we're being fully compliant. If they have any issues or questions, they'll let us know. We have a great relationship with them. We're excited to be able to more fully conserve some land in New Paltz by going this route. Paul, did you have a question?
I'm curious to know whether there will be an access road going out of Ermin Way onto North Putt when this is all built. Ermin Way is now a private road past our property.
Where the Ermin Lane here is likely going to remain a private road. with no change to the future.
So Woodland Pond will not have access to North Putt through Erman Way.
No.
Rolf?
Is it possible to move a wetland?
Possible, yes. Advisable, no. Very difficult, very, very expensive. And it's never, ever your first option. There's a sequence of planning activities that have to happen, excuse me, to be able to develop in wetlands at all. And I talked about the first two steps, avoid and minimize. If you absolutely can't avoid or minimize, you still have to get through a permit issuance standard that basically has to say that your project has to be so important that it outweighs the values of all wetlands. And that's an almost impossible standard.
I'm
to
not
meet.
suggesting
Yeah.
you wipe it
Yeah.
out, but move it down, say, to where the lower one is. If you want to open up the land some more.
Again, we have to avoid wetlands first.
Okay.
So it's a matter of, this is the landscape we're given. We have to design to the landscape we're given. And we can't change the landscape to fit what we want it to be. I mean, it would be much easier if we could get rid of that wetland on the south end of the property altogether. We'd have a nice big area of complete upland.
Yep.
Wouldn't that be wonderful? Would make planning so much easier. But that's not what we have. And the law requires that we work with the landscape that exists.
And I believe you were using the word wetland and then also swamp. Are you differentiating between the two?
No, a swamp is a kind of wetland.
Okay.
It's just one type.
I didn't know if you were telling
Yeah.
us something.
To just echo one of Mike's comments, Woodland Pond has been really in the forefront by hiring us, by getting us involved early in the process of development for this purpose, to understand exactly what's here and then work with what we have to see how it fits into the future development for Woodland Pond. It wasn't the other way around, where they have a plan, here's the buildings, figure out how to stick it on the property. It's this has been exactly the opposite. We've been looking at it from an environmental perspective from the beginning to work backwards into the design.
Yeah, and to that point, I would like to officially thank the existing landowners for letting us the access to do that, because it's gotten a great amount of insight before we've actually purchased the land. So, Mayor?
So a question that I have, the site includes property that's in the village of New Paltz and the town of New Paltz. So like one of the slides showed that. So
sorry, that line on the slide that you saw is incorrect. This line, the village line, is at the bottom of the property.
Okay, so there's no issue
Correct.
or discussion of annexation. Okay.
No, the town line comes along this side and on the bottom side. This parcel here is wholly in the village.
So because it's contiguous with the town, would you still need to include the town board and the town planning board as involved agencies?
We would identify them as an involved agency, yes.
Yep. Other questions, Rachel?
I just wanted to make sure you were aware that the salamanders that breed in that pool, you're aware that they do cross George Danskin Way, that they come from the west and they head east. And that when Woodland Pond was built, they put critter crossings under there, but they forgot to put the grading that's supposed to go above the critter crossings so that the water, when it rains, can go down into the crossing. Because as it is now, they can't use the crossings because they're bone dry. And not even more so, they put a wall on either side of the tunnels. So that even further impedes the salamanders crossing. So every year, volunteers have to go and carry the salamanders across the street. And what concerns me is that there's going to be more traffic, I would imagine, on George Danskin Way. And especially if you were using that, you are not using that area, the concrete slab there, as a staging area for the construction of the buildings at the center. Is that true or not true?
We're currently using it, yes.
Yeah, it looked kind of like you were using it as a parking area, but
Mhm.
I'm concerned about the traffic going there, especially if it's going there during their breeding season. So I just wanted to say that. And then also, you're gonna like tear up the concrete pad there, but you're gonna leave the stone wall, right? There's like an old.
Yes,
stone
no,
wall.
we're not, so the concrete slab is the only thing we're touching. There is an old foundation that's in here right up between the
Yes.
adjacent area and the thing. We're not going in there. And there's no reason to go into the wetland buffer, as Mike said before, minimize. There's no benefit of going in there to take out a wall that is completely grown in with trees and walks around.
Okay.
But a blank concrete slab that has no habitat, that's adjacent to the other one that's going to be removed, makes logical sense to go in and take it out and restore that area back to some grass and trees and woods and shrubs to make it more fitting with the habitat.
Okay, yeah, no, I agree with that. It is awfully close to the pool, like that wall, like the pool is just on the other side of that wall. Yeah.
Right, the wall is immediately next to the building.
And so, yeah, so I guess that was one concern. And then just to be clear, you're planning to put two developments or you're gonna do two builds. One is gonna front on George Danskin Way and the other one is gonna front on North Putt Corners. Is that how it's gonna be?
That's the current plan, correct, that we're looking at.
Okay, I just wanted to, and I'm hoping that I noticed, well, one thing we asked for with the others, when you built the cottage that was right by the wetland, that you not give them lawns. I mean, so I'm just hoping you'll keep with that as well. And I don't know if how much trouble it would be to repair the crossing. Yeah, here.
I will speak to that. I think that my understanding is that the current site plan, including the critter crossing, complied with the site plan requirements at that time. That being said, if there's a way for us to improve the salamander habitat and their migration path, we can definitely look at it. I mean, we're going to be doing work in that area and we're very committed to the creatures. So if there are improvements that can be made, I mean, I don't want to like write a check that I can't cover, but I see a lot of our board members are here. So I would definitely be in favor of us looking at it because otherwise we know that the salamander population migrates. We know it happens every year. The other thing I'll just mention, and as Ken and Michael indicated, we do not have a final site plan yet. But one of the things that we are contemplating related to your question about the traffic is actually closing Danskin Way off from the south, which originally there was a gate there. And we've had numerous conversations with the very adjacent landowners just to kind of get their perspective and thoughts on that. Obviously, we would need to contemplate emergency access, so there's a way to narrow the road, but still give access for emergency vehicles with a gate. And also we'd have to contemplate a turnaround for snowplows and so forth. But this is something that we're actively discussing because we don't want to inadvertently create a traffic problem or exacerbate a traffic problem. And if we can make improvements to the existing design while we're doing some other disturbances, this is the time to do it. So we're actively evaluating those options right now.
There are several of us in the room who have been very involved with the land before it was Woodland Pond. So we're talking about over 2 decades ago. And there are several of us in the room who worked very hard to protect the wetlands before there was a wetland ordinance in New Paltz. So I want to thank you so much for making this process be transparent and quote unquote friendly and inclusive. And I really want to believe that we will be forward in the ecological needs of the the biologic community and of the human community at the same time. So I just want you to know that we need to be included as community members who may not be living here, that we have worked very hard to make and appreciate the development of Woodland Pond, and also be environmentally concerned about what we can do as citizens to work together. We're smarter now than we were 2 decades ago. We had some sadly some major fighting because of what we had to do, lawsuits and issues in the village, in the planning board, with New Life, with Kingston Regional Health, who were involved here. Probably you were a newbie then, you were a little kid, but you were here. So anyway, thank you for making this open, this discussion. It really goes a long way, and we know that's what we need to do to be forward in how we're doing this. So thank you. What's your name? I'm Judy Jaffe.
Oh, Judy Jaffe. Oh, of course. Yes. And you ride the horse. There we go. Well, I'm Michelle. It's nice to finally meet you face to face. I did not have an opportunity to point out that not only do you have some of us from Woodland Pond proper, but you also have a number of our board members. Our board chair is here. Several of our board members are here. We have actually been working on these studies and this analysis. We've used multiple different civil engineering firms, but this goes back all the way really to late 2022. So this is, a number of years in the making, and we understood and know that all of the money that we've invested in the various studies and all of the surveys, many, many, many meetings with DEC, that it's all at risk because we don't have a site plan application in yet. But we felt that it was important not only to the community members that we knew would be interested, but also to go into an eventual planning board application with as much of this work completed, so that a full evaluation and a fulsome explanation could be provided. So Dave means it when he says to reach out. We do intend this entire presentation will go on our YouTube channel, which is publicly available. We did put the invitation out, and we hope that we do get engagement on it. And if there are things that are easy fixes or easy solutions, then we absolutely want to incorporate that in our planning board application.
Judy, I want to thank you. I just want to reiterate what Michelle said, what you said. We did have a board meeting last week, and I probably can't say it as eloquently as Michelle said at our board meeting, but we were talking about the conservation easement and wanting to fit into the community and fit everything into the ecology of the plan, and us work into that, as opposed to somebody I think Ken might have said that, us, the plan working into that. So it's being a very thoughtful process. We want to make sure that we do it properly and that it's done to take care of the environment and the concerns of the community. Tracy Badgley, sorry.
One other thing I'll just add while Ken is passing the mic. If you've driven onto the Woodland Pond property through the main entrance sometime within the last 6 months, you will see signs that now indicate natural lawn care in process. So not only have we actively been working very hard to reduce our actual amount of lawn that needs to be taken care of, but we made a decision as a community to move to natural lawn care, which means no pesticide use and so on and so forth. So to your point, Rachel, it's not even just about reducing the lawn, but how we're actually caring for the lawn now. That was an active decision that we made. We put the signs up because we didn't know if we were going to see significant changes in the quality of the landscaping. But we're letting people know when you come in, if the grass looks a little shabby, it's because we're doing natural lawn care and we don't have irrigation. So that is a decision that we actively made, though. We are trying to be the best stewards that we can for. Ken's got one back there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know everybody's probably ready to go home. I just thought I could save you some time because in 2014, we went through the whole Lent Drive. It was actually a cul-de-sac when we all bought and we fought, and then they put up the gate. It absolutely cannot be blocked off. We went through, we had attorneys and everything. Per state law, it has to be open all the time. for emergency vehicles. You cannot have any barrier there. The other thing I had is I went and talked to the town about a week ago, and they had mentioned that Shivertown had been brought up as an option. Is that still on the table or no? A property on Shivertown?
No, we actually were approached by a realtor last
Oh.
week, letting us know that there was property available on
It
Shivertown.
wasn't you guys, it was someone trying to sell you on it.
They reached out to us. Yeah. For a variety of reasons, that's really not useful to us. First of all, it's that the town would require annexing. Water and sewer is an issue there as well. So we'll obviously take note of that question about the blocking off of the road. This is the first that we've heard that there's a state prohibition on it, and our attorneys have looked at it.
So typically, and we've done this on multiple campuses and other things, the access can't be blocked with a barrier that they can't drive through. There are technology now. We have a couple different things, and we had original discussions with the fire department, and they thought where it's called click to enter. So if the fire truck rolls up, they don't have to get out. They hit the radio, the frequency of their radios trips the gate, and the gate will open. Basically what it's meant for is if an emergency vehicle comes up, you hit the gate, you can't get out and have to open a gate, unlock a gate. Maybe it's frozen, maybe it's chained. You don't have the key, all of that. So the technology has changed in some time. The other thing would be is as part of our development, when we're talking about Ermine Lane, which would be a pathway through, we would make it wide enough, and we had talked to them just for emergency vehicle that could pass through. So there would be alternative points of entry for them as well. The idea being of why we wanted to close it off was to prevent the community over there and Woodland Pond residents to use the main gate instead of using the other.
I will just add, for those whose brains are working faster than mine that are thinking, well, what would happen to the Millbrook Preserve trailhead in that case? That many of the community accesses off of George Danskin. We would intend to improve the parking lot, enlarge it, and allow access through the Woodland Pond property to get to that Millbrook Preserve trailhead if we were to close off the end of Danskin for emergency vehicles. But all of these things would need to go through the planning board and have to be regulatorily approved, obviously. So this is why we're having these meetings now, to kind of get some ideas from all of you who have the history, the experience, and can incorporate and try to answer these questions before we ever put a site plan application in, make it easier on everybody.
And I can just attest as an engineer who's done a lot of work in the area and everything, it's a pleasure to work with a group that wants to do the right thing on the other side. So, to echo what you were saying, and obviously I'm on the other side of it, but it's fun to be able to develop and design with a project where they're looking at it with that in mind.
Other questions or comments? Okay. So Dave's contact information is there, but he also has business cards. So I would encourage any of you that do not have his contact info to please grab a business card from Dave. As I indicated, this presentation will be made available on our YouTube channel tomorrow, which is an open, free YouTube. You just go to Woodland Ponds, you can subscribe, you can see any new videos that we post. Certainly, as soon as the planning board application goes in, you will all be notified of opportunities for public hearings and so forth. But please, let's not make that the only time we hear from you, because if there are other things that we can sort out before that application ever goes in, you've got the captive audience in this room. You've got the board, management, our engineers, and we are committed to making this go forward as successfully as possible. And we absolutely appreciate everybody that took the time to come out tonight, sincerely. Oh, hang on one sec. I'm sorry. One more.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump on that bandwagon as well. I'm Christy DeBoer, Executive Director of the Walcott Valley Land Trust. We've been working with Dave on talking about how to incorporate this additional property into the existing conservation easement. And I just want to echo, we have a great relationship with Woodland Pond. I don't want to say you're one of our favorite easements, but we really enjoy working with you all on this project, and we're excited to continue that relationship.
Great. All right, everybody good? All right, thank you all so much for coming. Have a happy Thanksgiving.